So, welcome everybody to another edition of the Expert Talks on behalf of Mediaverse and Trublo. We are among innovation people here today, and we are very happy to welcome an expert from Sweden. Donnie Lygonis is a business coach and innovation strategist, and I think for many projects, he's the type of guy you want to meet early in your project, because before you run into big problems and half-baked software that you have never shown to a potential user, this kind of stuff, because he and his team at KTH have worked extensively on extending a system that was originally developed at the NASA for technology readiness into a full-blown system to help startups decide what to do next on a number of dimensions, and I don't go deeper into that. But what I can say is we used it extensively for the 45 projects we funded in Trublo. And one of the big benefits was that we have good portfolio overview, because we asked monthly data from them, and we can show on a heat map like how the project developed. And it's not about control, it's about helping at a certain point. For example, most of the projects had their team from the competency was very well, like on a high level of readiness. But one of the tricks is finding the customers, and other is then aligning the technology, which is an ever-shifting overlap. So it's not simple. And today we would like to have an open discussion. Donnie will talk, like give an introduction and an overview and talk about his experience. And as he said, maybe for the people who came a little bit later, you can ask questions anytime. I will be moderating together with Nico a little bit, like alerting Donnie to that there are questions. But otherwise, I hope we have a lively discussion. And with that, floor is open to you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. And thank you for, could you enable screen sharing, please, for me as well?
Yes.
No, thank you for the wonderful intro. It feels like you've already done my presentation. So I can just say, any questions, anyone? And we can start with a dialogue. No, seriously, I'm looking forward to going through, I'll go through some background and how we came to develop this, because it was actually developed for ourselves first and foremost, and then first after 6 years we started opening up for other people as well. And today it's a fully open system with almost 3,000 users all over the world, with institutions and universities and incubators and also corporate clients that are using it a lot. And we're hoping to spread it as a global common language for early innovation support. So it's your Esperanto for innovation support, I guess. And hopefully we get a bigger spread than Esperanto got, because that didn't really take off. I mean, in Europe, we probably all know about the TRL. And when we started working with with all of our projects, we realized that we were going to very quickly have a very, very big caseload, and we wanted to build a very sort of efficient machine to make sure that we could handle all of the projects with a good overview. So we started with an Excel sheet where we tried to create some kind of a traffic light system with green and yellow and red, and that very, very quickly turned into a Excel sheet from hell, because we had like with 180, 200 projects, it was no overview, and it was just all different colors, and we didn't know what was going on. And we also realized that the only thing that we were measuring was speed, because that's sort of and we were sort of measuring how well the projects are doing. However, some projects, they need more calendar time to do the same amount of work, and some things just need longer time. So time itself isn't it isn't a solid enough good basic component to measure. Time is good. I'll come back to time later on. But as a progress measurement, that might not be what you want to measure only. So then we started looking around, and we found this, we found this TRL thing that NASA had developed back in the 80s and 70s and 80s for their distributed teams for building and setting up and bringing down rockets. And we liked the idea of the 1 to 9 methodology. 1 being I have a new idea for a rocket, and then 9 being the rocket's on the way to the moon. And we like that sort of 1 to 9 methodology. And we're thinking, well, how can we apply that to our reality of helping early ideas move from inception to transaction? How can we build something that can help them move from the first early stage of how I have an idea to a point where they are actually up and running and hopefully have missed as little as possible along the way. And that's sort of kind of where we also started working with the TRL. Anyway, so then I'll skip the first number of slides because you've already heard the whole thing about me being Donnie and KTH Innovation and KTH, and we can skip this. And then coming to the point where I'm just saying that we also realized that we were going to have a very high caseload. So today we're handling 400 registered projects into the system, which is actually registered when they have decided to try and start something. So pre 400, we have another, I don't know how many, 1,000 meetings with people before they decide to go for it. So 400 registered ideas and then 15% coming out the other end. And which means we have about 300 ideas in our pipeline at any given time, which then is between 6 and 60 months, depending on how deep tech the research is and how much help they need over time. And then through the process, we've also built a very sort of fast-paced leapfrog effort of validation efforts in 4 stages, where we give small money in 4 stages where they can validate 1 step at a time. And this is also a very important part in measuring who gets money for what and what is the money for and how to move them from where to where, which with the money. What is the money supposed to do? And then on top of the generic program, we've also built a number of what we call programs, but that's just, clustering people in groups and delivering the same message to a number of people to increase efficiency. So that's a number of programs that we've had that developed as well. All of this, of course, gives a lot of data points because we have to measure from where to where, which value are we creating, what's the money for, where's the money going to take them, and with a very high caseload, a lot is going on. So then, as I said, the Excel sheet, that's actually the Excel sheet from back in 2010, I think, which of course turned into a very, very unruly sheet of data, which we couldn't understand in the end. So then we found the TRL, and we liked, as I said, we liked the 1 to 9 methodology, but we realized that TRL and technology isn't really enough, because innovation is more than just technology. And as I made a joke in the beginning here of the TRL, with speaking a lot with Europe and EU and trying to say that if you're only using TRL to try and help measure, and not only measure but also run early stage ideas, then it's like riding a one-legged horse. I mean, there's so much more to innovation than only technology, because successful innovation is all about having a customer, a market, and a user that has a need, and addressing that in a sustainable and profitable way over time, developed by people that have resources, and then the whole IP and the results is kind of the core of what they're trying to do. So a lot of things go into this when it comes to building something. So we needed something that could handle things like customers, the ones that pay for it, business, so it can actually prove that it can make money somehow, a business model, sustainable over time, team, actually people are needed to do things don't happen by themselves, funding, of course, to get the people to do it, and then IPR to protect what's being done. So that's the sort of the basic lowest common denominator generic areas we picked when we put together these first sort of the first thing. And what we then built was the KTH Innovation Readiness Level, which today is a 6-dimensional tool that has a number of basic, not principles, but basic uses. It's a communication tool, it's a guidance and structure tool, and it's a visualization and measuring tool. And you can use it for many different things, but today it has the 6, as I said, lowest common denominator scales. It's customer, tech, IPR, team, funding, and business model. And we've been working on it since 2008, 2009, 2010, and we're still working on it. Me and Daniel just spent 2 hours a day, actually, because we're trying to do like annual updates with small updates every year, because we're trying to keep it current and adding some tools and changing some words and making sure that it feels up to date. And right now we're doing some updates on the business model, the business model, readiness level scale, and also the funding one is being updated. So the 2023 version, which hopefully will be out before the end of the year, we'll see an updated FRL and BRL. And then next year we're going to work on the team and the maybe the customer as well. So there's lots and lots of things happening, and we're always also, and this is something that I want to say right away, is that we are super, super grateful for the response we've had from the community, because we have, as I said, over 3,000 downloads now, with hundreds and hundreds of universities and institutions and incubators using it. And we really want to encourage a two-way dialogue here, because we want to hear your points of views and your ideas, because we have so many users that are using it for so many cool things and developing their own either versions, kind of, but also their own tools for it. And I mean, there's one guy in the EU that uses it as an assessment tool. There's one guy in Brazil that's translated it all to Portuguese for a big research center. And we want to have the feedback back so we help each other build a common tool that we all can use. Anyway, in its simplest form, and this is something that I say to everyone, that, you know, don't let it scare you, because we use it for everything. So we're kind of super users here, but in its simplest form, it is a printed, laminated A4 that you have on a table, 6 of these A4s. And then when you sit down with a team, you can actually point and talk about very abstract things in very concrete ways. So you have a new team and they come in and say, I have this great idea. We've spent 2 years or 3 years in the lab and we've developed a technology and we're finished. I say, perfect. Let's look at customers, shall we? And they say, well, we haven't thought about that yet. Okay, well, who do you think needs this? I mean, do you actually know who needs this product? And they say, well, no, well, we assume that everybody will want to have it because of this and this and this. So then I say, well, then you're at 1. If you're only assuming that there's a possible need, then you don't know. And then 2, then you've identified a need. And 3, then you've had feedback on that actual need and also the solution. And then 4 is confirmed need problems from several customers. And then 5 is established interest. That's the confirmed solution. And then it's confirmed sales further up. So usually people overestimate where they are, and they underestimate how far they have to go. So it's a very good way of getting people sort of in a sort of idea of, aha, this is what we need to do to get to a point. And it also shows them a roadmap. Oh, it's self-changing pictures. It also shows them a roadmap of where they're going. And you can have a discussion with researchers about, where do you want this to go? I'll come back to that as well. Today, lots of people are using this. In Sweden, most of the innovation offices are using it, and the incubators and the innovation agency. I also use it as an assessment tool, but we're also spreading very, very nicely around the world. Well, very many entrepreneurship centers and different kinds of universities are using it, and also foundations. H&M Foundation, that runs the Global Change Award, which is the biggest textile and fashion competition in the world. As I said, it's a communication tool first and foremost. It gives you a possibility to speak about something which is very abstract in a very concrete way with people who previously haven't been able to speak the same language, and now they can start communicating. So tech can speak to sales, can speak to marketing, can speak to people like HR in a way where they can actually agree upon definitions, so they know where they are and they know where they're going, which makes it easier to run projects, because you can always break things down to action points and deadlines and accountability and deliverables in a much, much clearer way than just saying, finish the web page kind of thing. And of course, that then is, as I'm saying, it's a fantastic, I'm saying it because I use it with all of my teams. It's when it comes to development roadmap and helping teams as a guide to do the right things at the right time, and also have like an idea of the whole process of where they're going, and also being able to structure it and just help them focus on the right thing at the right time without losing track of the big picture. Mirko talked briefly about the overview and how it can actually give you a very good portfolio overview. And this is just an interesting example of one example of that is, here's 4 teams. It's from the Global Change Award with H&M. And if you have a cluster of 4 teams like this, and this is just showing their progress now, the 2 different colors, that's nothing more than that. It's like 6 months into the game, how they've progressed. But it also shows you that, hang on a minute, all of these 4 are kind of low on the BRL, which means that if we did one workshop with 4 teams, it would actually increase efficiency, and we'd have a peer-to-peer discussion in the teams of how they could increase their BRL as well. So it's a very good way of understanding who has which needs and how can we cluster needs in groups so actually to move them forward. And it also then helps us design the content for workshops. It helps us design content for programs, because we can say that we want them to go from here to here over time, which means they need to understand and learn this and this and this and this. So it's content-wise, it's also a very good tool. It's what, it's not how. It won't tell you how to do something specifically, because the how part is very, very specific to every single case. So in the beginning, one of the big things is usually the translation efforts that the team have to sort of translate their reality into the tool, so they understand, like in TRL or in CRL, what do the different tiers mean of the customer tiers, and what's the different environments, like the in the demonstrator and the operational environment and relevant environment, and what's a prototype and what's a demonstrator, and all the definitions is very case specific. But it's not a how. The how is, I can come back to the how as well. This it's progress, it's not quality or potential. So something at 2 isn't worse than something at 6. It just hasn't come as far yet. So it's not a quality tool or a potential tool. It's a progress tool, first and foremost. Of course, something that has come further might be, for investors, it might be more attractive to say, we won't invest in something which is below IRL generally level 6. Well, fine. Well, then it's, but that's still progress, not quality. Then the how is a lot to do with the complementary tools that are out there already. The lean canvas and the business model canvas and the Tam-Sam-Som and the SDG matrices and all of these different models and canvases and templates that we're all using, they slot very nicely into the different levels. And another job, again, me and Daniel, we're working on the updates as well. We're working on actually mapping out all of the templates that we use to connect them to different levels of the different scales. So we can say that if you're going to progress in CRL, then we suggest these different templates. And for the BRL, here are different templates. So there's also a sort of an understanding of how things fit in there. And that's a big job that we're working on as well. For different groups, different uses, but for an ecosystem, I know the Danish, they use it a lot for this. When it comes to looking at an ecosystem and seeing like the chain of events and who does what, where, who starts and ends where, and where are the interfaces. And then you can work with refining the interfaces to say that, okay, well, we don't start until, like when we work with the incubators, we've spent a couple of years working with them, trying to refine the interface between us and the incubators, because we say to them, you tell us where you start based on the readiness levels. And then we can take our project to that point and a little bit beyond. So there's never any doubt that the cases we send to you aren't progressed enough. You can say no to them for many other reasons, but you should never be able to say no to them because they haven't come far enough. So tell us where you start. That's a very, very good way of working with who comes either before or after you to build a chain of events in a system, in an ecosystem. And also for grant assessments, I know that the Swedish Innovation Agency, Vinnova, they're using it as a pre-screening tool, because if they get in 1,000 applicants for 100 grants, they can much quicker now say that these are too early, these are too late, and here in the middle of the sweet spot, they're the ones that we're going to actually look into depth. So it saves them so much time in quickly finding the right, bit more qualified people to look at. For a coach like myself, it's fantastic when it comes to concrete talking points and keeping momentum going. There's always something to do. I can always ask my teams, give me the coming month, which I do every month. I do a status check-in every month. And I say to them, just go through where you are and look at every single level and give me at least one action point or two action points the coming month that you're going to focus on that will either help you fill a level or level up on a level to the next level. So there's always something to be doing. And then we can talk about, was that the right thing to focus on or not? Is this the right thing to do? But there's always something to do. And then for like Imperial College in London, they're only 4 people in the team, but they have a very big network of really qualified external mentors, and they use it for quality assurance. So they can speak to all of their mentors, and everybody is sort of on board in the same language, and they know that everybody's speaking to the projects in the same kind of language. And then, of course, for the teams themselves, it's a fantastic alignment tool because they can finally align in detail on what they're doing. And again, planning and executing and following up makes it so much easier. When we use it, I think one question that I like asking, especially researchers, not necessarily students and faster product, but researchers. When you ask them, but what does 9 mean to you? And you can start the dialogue about what do they actually want to see this becoming, and how would they want to be a part of this. And which ways, and then we can open up, because this branches out. Is it a license? Is it a startup? Is it a collaboration? Is it knowledge transfer? And then you can start understanding the possibilities, and then suddenly you have 4 or 5 parallel 9s. But that's a discussion we need to have early, so you don't lock down too soon on what you think is the only way forward. So I like that question. It also gives them an idea of, this is what we need to do to get there. I mean, this is where we see it becoming something. So the bigger picture is important. Momentum, we talked about that. Alignment, we talked about that. What do the different levels mean to your specific project? Some additional tips. We use it for self-assessment all the time. We use all the applications to our programs. People have to self-assess and say where they are and where they're going. And they're always super off in the beginning, because they always overestimate themselves, of course, but that's a natural thing. It's part of the learning process of them understanding and getting into the whole methodology, understanding where they are and where they're going. The scales are in general, they're 1 to 4 is internal, and they flip, and then 5 to 9 is external work. So the lower level is very much sort of desktop research and internal. But then when you hit 4, then they have to start speaking to customers. They have to go out and meet the market. They have to go and check with other people. And it's also a joke I always tell, but after 9 years in the army, my first job, one thing I learned very, very hard on was, if you're standing in the forest with a map in your hand and they don't align, then trust the forest. There's a reality as well. It's a guide. It's a template. It's a framework. It's not a, well, some people get very angry with us because what says in a book has to be true, but it's trust reality. You know what I mean? And this is important. It's not a static 1 to 9 thing. It's a living organ. It's like a jellyfish, right? It goes up and down, and all of the levels interconnect, and they'll pull each other up and they'll pull each other down. So you increase on the TRL, and then you go out on the CRL, and then you learn something from customers, and then boop, and then you go down to the beginning again, because that way didn't work. So you have to pivot and then try it a different way. So it's a very living thing that constantly, evolves up and down. And now back to time, and this is when the magic happens. If you add time to the readiness levels, so you see the readiness levels on the left, and then the time going on the timeline. And this is something I always play around with my teams, because if I say to them, so where do you want to be, need to be, have to be, hope to be in 12, 16, 20, 24 months, they start understanding the concept of calendar time, which is completely different from the concept of work time and delivered time. And there's a summer holiday. And there's a Christmas holiday. Somebody's having a baby. I'm going on a holiday there, or whatever happened. And I'm doing my thesis work, and things come in the way. And then there might be a deadline, so we have to have something released by Christmas. So then we can backcast and say, well, then we had to start at midsummer to get it done by Christmas. And then suddenly you start understanding the concept of time in the perspective of your readiness levels, and then it becomes a really, really powerful road mapping tool. But this is kind of a bit of course, going into a bit sort of more super user thing, but I'm saying time is super, super cool. It's not a project management tool. There are lots of others. There's Trello, there's Asana, there's Monday.com, there's all these others, but we say it's the content. It's the skeleton that you put into the project management tool. There's one on Trello that we share. It's happily where I think I've color coded depending on the readiness levels, different colors, so you can see which one is what if you want that. Here's one from my case. It's an Excel sheet again, but they're using Excel to track their readiness levels. And they built a huge Excel, which covered their whole development of their startup. And this was actually a team of experienced entrepreneurs that came in, and they did a case here, and they were given the readiness levels, and they completely loved it. So they built an enormous spreadsheet, which covered like 2 years ahead, where every month had goals or targets, and then they color coded things, and they really, really kept track of this. And they were a team of 9 people, so it really helped them keep everything under control. And they were a beautiful project. So yes, and then another thing that I've been working on. This is kind of a recent development. Sustainability is a big thing that we're adding to the tools now. But if you look at this as a reasonably well-known sort of sustainability strategy tool, where you go from harm to impact, and where you can be sort of all over the map at the same time. So some things in your business causes harm, some things avoids harm by at least following the rules, some things are actually trying to shift positive, and some things are actually making things better. So if with those 4 in mind, if we make a matrix, we can actually plot out our proposed business in these 4 different columns, and then see which of what is actually harm, at least following the rules, trying to be good, or actually making things better. So I mean, if we were doing this on any kind of like electric car, we could say, yeah, well, we're doing impact because it's great, because electric is good, and we're eliminating fossil fuels. However, batteries all the metals is kind of bad, so that's kind of in harm. But then when it comes to the agreements, at least for batteries, at least we're following the rules, so that's in responsibility. But then how can we then move everything to the right so it actually moves towards sustainability and impact? So that's also another way sort of working with the readiness levels, and just trying to play around with your different levels to see what in your business can actually become more sustainable and more impactful. And then just runs through some typical user cases, because I said, I mean, we use it for everything in KTH Innovation. So everything from quick assessments and first meetings. Hi, everyone. Welcome to KTH Innovation. Let's talk about your idea. And then we talk about where they are, and very quickly we can get an idea of where they are, and they can see where they're going. But also when it comes to creating content for our programs, and also the validation efforts I talked to you about. So remember, I'm going to show you some of those examples. But as I said, we use it for most things when it comes to working with the teams. And one thing I think is important with the teams is that it actually, personally, I think it helps build better teams, because they learn how to participate in projects, because as it breaks down nicely into action points and deliverables and accountability, everybody gets, the point of being responsible for an action and delivering it. So it's kind of a good project management training tool as well. So here's the validation grants. I talked about the 4 steps of validation that we do with KTH Innovation. So if we're going to try and progress on the CRL, here in CRL 4, it says the problem and need is confirmed from multiple customers' users. So we probably need to go and speak to multiple customers' users. So then in the grant application, we've actually added the headline that describe the most important question you want to have answered during this validation project, and connect the question to how the project can increase in readiness in any key area according to the KTH Innovation readiness levels. So they have to use the readiness levels to actually say, we want to progress from this to that by doing this and this and this, which again helps them understand what they're actually trying to ask for money for and where they're going to go with the money. So an example text could be, the main goal with this project is ready to increase CRL. We want to get to a plan level 4 by identifying, talking to possible customer users and confirming their problems and need for our technology. And that's some key points there that they then can speak to a consultant about and actually design a validation project so they can go out and get that information from possible users, customers. So this is typically how we design the validation efforts. And then when it comes to the goal setting and the content for, this is the pre-incubator as an example. It's a 12-month program. And then this is sort of where we decide sort of, I think we can skip, here. So like we start discovery phase 1, innovation readiness about 3. We've actually upped that. 3 when they come in, and then sort of 4 in the first 4-month evaluation, 5 in the second 8-month evaluation session. And we want to get them to 6 when they launch. So it's like 3, 4, 5, 6 over time there. So then I know kind of what they should know when they come in, which helps us decide who gets in, because we can say, because we want to build groups that are kind of maturity level similar, so they have the same experience. And then we know where we're taking them, so we know kind of what we want them to know when they're finished. So that helps me design the workshop. So this is part of the year. On the left, you see the list of the readiness levels, and then going right in the columns, you see the different workshops, how I've designed 42 workshops over 1 year, how they then align to the different readiness levels to take the teams over 1 year from 3 up to 6 and launch. So it's a very good way sort of designing not every workshop and not all the content, but at least determining where do we want them to be when they come in and where do we want them to be when they leave us. And that will determine what we actually try and teach them during that time they are at us. And this is something that we've heard from actually people using the tool, is that some of them have even had to redesign their programs because they realized that they weren't actually adding enough value during the time of the program. Because once they started looking at where they started and where they ended, there was no real sort of major value creation. So now they've rewritten the content so they actually get further while they're actually in the program. During this program, this is another thing, that we have evaluation sessions every 4 months. And then the thing we do here is that we use what we call the action plan, which is a simple document where all of the teams, they get to fill in, we're here now, in 4 months, we want to be there. And that means that we're going to do this and this and this the coming 4 months for every readiness level, which helps them, again, sit down and think of what do we want to focus on the coming 4 months. Then with that plan, we have the evaluation session, 3 coaches and a team, and we team up with the coaches. So this happens every 4 months. And then we go through their action plan. And then we, together with them, can discuss, is this the right priority? Do we think this? Usually, we force them to make even smarter goals, as in quantifying how many customers are you going to contact? How many customers are going to try to onboard? What is exactly the deliverable on technology? And so forth and so forth and so forth. So they have some super clear, measurable, deliverable goals that we then can follow up the next 4 months. That's another way sort of teaching them how to run projects, but it's also a really good way to focus on the right things at the right time and get stuff done. Every month, I run an open webinar on LinkedIn. And there's also the Innovation Readiness Level Forum. Almost hitting, it's actually an old image here from a couple of weeks ago. It's 493 members now. So if nothing else, I will encourage you to go in and join the forum on LinkedIn, the KTH Innovation Readiness Level Forum. If nothing else, it's because you will meet hundreds of other innovation professionals from all over the world. We have from Japan all the way around, all the way to Brazil. And this is Wilson Alves from Senai Cimatec in Brazil, Brazil's biggest research institute. And he talked about how they use it for everything. They've translated it to Portuguese and they use it in all of their labs. And it's helped them do incredible efficiency work when it comes to delivering technology. Super cool. Next month, October, I think it's October 19th. It's in the group. I have DTU from Denmark, Danske Tekniske Universitet. DTU going to tell us about how they use it. They've designed an incredible Excel sheet how they use it and follow their projects through the process. I'm really looking forward to hearing DTU's talk next month. So make sure to catch that one as well. It's free online to download. The tool is open for all. We released under a Creative Commons license, so you can download it and you can adapt it to your own environment. The only thing you cannot do is sell it on or try and make money on it, because it's a Creative Commons open source license, and we want it to spread to as many people as possible. And we're also trying to keep the 6 lowest common denominator sort of scales. There are so many other scales. There's sustainability readiness level, there's manufacturing readiness level, there's investment readiness level. Use as many other scales you want, but we'll stick to 6. So there's always like a lowest common denominator shared language between everyone. And we of course think, yes, it's a common language. It's a really good way of following projects through the whole process. Handoff between stakeholders if you're in an ecosystem. Common KPIs in an ecosystem. We can set KPIs that together with other people increase efficiency in the system. Yes, we think we spend money better by doing this because we're actually very clear on what the money goes to. And we actually think that the entrepreneurs, second time around, they're usually so much better because they know from the start what to aim for and what to do. So it's a learning experience. It really is a learning experience. And with that, I will say thank you. I'll open up for questions and comments and any other kinds of feedback that you might have. So, please.
Thank you so much. I can tell from the energy that comes through Zoom how committed you are to this topic. It's really amazing.
Wonderful, wonderful. There, Jochen.
I don't want to press ahead, but hello there. Yeah, very, very interesting. I have a question, or maybe it's more asking you for advice. Now, what you've outlined is really, really interesting. So if this were a worldwide standard and everybody would go by it, that would make everything very easy to compare and judge and whatever. Now, putting myself in the shoes of somebody who has to evaluate proposals of others, which sometimes happens, I get proposals that state we are at TRL, especially technology readiness level, whatever, 4, and by the end of the project, we will be at 6, 7, or whatever number. Now, my problem is, and this is where I would like to get some advice from you, how can I see through it? How can I really understand whether what is claimed is appropriate? And how can I sort of monitor the process? Because it's all nice to state that something is at a certain level, but how can I really see through it and confirm that this is the case, and also then monitor? Because, I mean, they may not be using your model, they may be using another model, so that makes it really difficult for me to assess properly whether what I read is accurate or not.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good question. Thank you for asking that. That is, of course, one of the eternal, questions. But the usually it's as soon as you start sort of scraping on the surface and digging into the actual level that they state they're on, and you start sort of looking into the finer print, because if you look at, I mean, as the levels are designed today, you have like a front and a back, as I showed you, right? And the front might be it's like a short description. Let me see. I'll pick up something here. Hang on, give me a second here. I love that question, by the way. Good. Quick share of the screen. Hang on. There we go. So here's the. Oops. There. I'm sharing. Yeah. Yes, I'm sharing this. Good. So here's the learner's level. So here's the TRL. So if you're only looking at TRL and you get something, and they say we're at 4 validation laboratory, and then they say we're at 6 demonstration in relevant environment, then of course it's hard if you never get to talk to them, of course. But I mean, if you start talking to people and you start looking, and then you start, asking them, okay, well, tell me about how how have you defined the different parts of your project here, and how have you designed, like in 6, then they've said a representative model of prototype of technology has been shown to actually work in a relevant environment. Will you please explain a relevant environment to me? What is relevant to you, and what are you trying to prove in that environment? And that then, of course, usually connects to, if you go back to the CRL, that usually connects to like at least a CRL5 or a CRL6, because the testing of product service has confirmed the value and benefits, because that you can hardly do the TRL at that level without doing something on the CRL on that level. And then usually they say, well, we haven't spoken to anybody yet. Oh, well, if you haven't spoken to anybody yet, there's no way that you're going to ever be on that level until you've actually got an actual person to test your. I mean, and how do you even know if it's a relevant environment if you haven't spoken to anybody yet? So that usually ties together quite nicely. But I completely understand your question, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to solve, but it usually takes a discussion with the person or the team that have sent something in to try to understand where they actually are. But usually when you start speaking to people, I mean, and especially in the TRL, if you take that as an example, I'm going to close a window here because there are too many windows open. We go back to the TRL again. If you ask them to specify on the TRL what they mean with the different definitions, usually in only you. I'm not saying that you should only use they actually know what they're talking about or not when they've defined a relevant environment, operational environment, prototype, and if they can define the different things or not, or if it's just something that they think is, well, I mean, I had a team today that they say, oh, we're at TRL7, we're almost done, because we have this. I think it's an app. It's okay. Well, how have you defined an operational environment? And actual, if you're going up to 8 then as well, actual operations, and it's not just emailing me an APK file that I install separately on my phone. It's actually being on App Store that I can go to and download on my phone. You've gone through Apple's checks, and that's a payment solution. There's 1,000 things to get in place before you can reach that operational environment, which is the full. Because if you look at the full scope of an operational environment, there's one way of saying, yeah, well, we have a beta on a phone, which is sort of one kind of operational environment. But if you want it to be in the full context of how it's going to work in the real life context, then you have to define the operational environment in a different way. So once you start sort of digging into these sort of details of it, you can very quickly, personally, usually you can sort of determine if they know what they're talking about or not, and that can determine if they're in the right place or not. So it's mostly at best asking them to specify more specifically what they mean with different things.
So then, if I can follow that up just briefly, but that means you need to have an exchange, and there needs to be the possibility to ask questions. But if you just read it and there's a claim of a certain level, be it TRL, CRL, whatever, that can be easily claimed. And or do you think there's a chance of this or something like this becoming a Europe or even worldwide standard, so everybody can go by it? Because if different people use different sort of metrics, that's also tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the TRL we use is more or less the TRL that everybody else has used. So we haven't invented a new TRL. Mm-hmm. It's the same levels, and we've tried to design all of the other levels so they tie together. So it's not, there's not too many other TRLs out there. It's in the general. Then of course there are a number of overlays that you can use for the TRL and other, like there's one for pharma, there's one for medicine, there's one for medical equipment, there's one for other specific uses, but they follow the nomenclature, the same sort of. So yes, I personally think that we can find a global enough language like the business model canvas, which more or less everybody uses. Like there's lots of different canvases, but there's one sort of main business model canvas where we talk about value proposition, which is kind of the same universal thing for everyone. And I think that we can reach a point where we have, at least at a starting point, we have an idea of in this like readiness level ecosystem, that we have an idea of what like 1 to 4, 5, 6 is. And we work, we can say to our counterparts that we work between 1 and 6 in general. That's where we are. And then from 6 and onwards, you're sort of kind of in the business, doing business in an incubator. It's, yeah. So yeah, of course, I'm positive. I'm always positive. So
thank you.
Dimitar, here, what would be a problematic discrepancy between the different readiness levels? For instance, FRL 8 and TRL of 3. You mean that they've come to FRL 8 and they're only on TRL 3? Is that what you mean? I'm not quite sure what you mean here, Dimitar, but I think that is what you mean. I'm not sure.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, yes, that is precisely what I mean.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I thought so. Usually, but usually you have a hard time reaching the really higher levels on one scale without the other scales actually, coming up as well. I can say that it's going to be easier now that we're changing. We're not changing words or content, but we're changing the way how the words are presented in this update that's coming in hopefully before the end of the year, which makes it much easier. Because the thing is, you cannot progress to another level until you've filled the full level below. So you cannot be sort of half a TRL 8. You need to be on a full TRL 8, and that usually means that, or FRL 8, because that usually means that you might have filled, because it's all of the scales, they focus on 2 to 3 things. Like TRL, TRL is about environment and about solution. Those 2 things, right? And they follow each other all the way up. Team is about skills and actual competence, and it's about the culture and also the agreements and things, how the team is put together. So that's so everything has 2 parts. So you cannot sort of progress on one of those parts up to 8 until you fill the other part as well. So every level has to be filled before you can progress, which also usually makes the levels kind of follow each other more. So we very seldom see an 8 on one scale and then like 2 or 3 on all of the others. That's very, very, very unusual to see that. However, if you're a millionaire from the start and then you don't have any good ideas, then I guess you're FRL quite high from the start. But that's, then there's always an outlier. There's always an outlier. Let's see, we have Ruben, and then we have a comment. Gray is leaving us, and then Mirko. Yeah, Ruben.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for all your enthusiasm, because it's rather igniting me, I must say. I find it totally interesting. I find the combination of the latter 2 questions really interesting, because what we are doing in our research and cooperation team at Deutsche Welle is we do a lot of research on new technologies and looking into how we can bring that to journalism, right? So these are really low readiness levels most of the times, at least of the, maybe not of the technologies that we are researching, but of the products that we aim to make with that, or the solutions that we try to generate with that. And I have a couple of issues with assigning these innovation readiness levels to that, because, for example, the business readiness level will always be very low. It's not, we are not a team that brings stuff on market and then earn money with it. Let's say we have a couple of examples of that, but mostly not. And then when we're really low, very often, I mean, you just mentioned, okay, we are mostly between 4 and 6 or so. But then what I like is this 1 to 9 scale. And what I really like is the fact that you can break down the work and that you can show this roadmap of what do we need to do. And then you can take your team and fill in, how are we going to do this? What are the skills that we have? And how are we going to put them to work? if I can only move from 1 to 3, then that's rather limited, this breakdown. Do you have and if I change my breakdown and I make my 1 to 9, or I translate my 1 to 3 to a 1 to 9, then I lose comparability, right? With other projects or other products or with the whole system as such. Do you have examples of how people that are mostly on the lower levels, how they manage that?
Of course. I mean, a lot of our projects that we work with, I mean, the deep tech projects that we work with for years, but I will say though that, okay, so I mean, when we start working with projects, it's usually about some kind of research result that is then poised to go into some kind of utilization. Commercialization could be one way of utilizing it, of course, but there are many ways of utilizing results, of course. But since we don't work with them during research, when they come to us, they might be on the TRL scale. They might be a bit higher because they've at least had a result, and there's something to work with. But it's not, that result is not put in a contextual carrier yet, maybe. But then they might be very, very low on like CRL and BRL, FRL, everything like that. But I'll give you an example, which is it might sound off topic, but it's not. A Spanish colleague that uses the scales very, very much. She's actually an IP lawyer, and she works with patentable research in her university. And she said to me when I met her in the last conference, she said, I only open with the IPRL scale. That's how I start speaking to researchers, because then I can get them on board on the IP train and talking about how to protect their things. And then we start working with IP, and then suddenly they start understanding, they start glancing over at the team one, and then they start glancing over at the funding one because they need money as well. And then the whole sort of scale opens up for them. But I don't give them 6 scales and say, here, you're one at everything. But they, CO always opens with the IP scale, and then it branches out into the other ones. So, and you don't have to always sort of, constantly work on all 6. Some projects are much heavier on TRL and IPRL in the beginning. Team usually comes into it. Somebody has to do it. Customer user usually comes into it because somebody's going to use it, even though it's not a paying customer per se. It's going to come to use somehow, and then you have to speak to somebody and actually confirm somebody's want and need for it. So usually, it transfers quite nicely once you start working with it. And I wouldn't be worried about working at the lower levels, because if you turn to the back of the papers, the level of detail is usually detailed enough to have enough to do on lower levels as well. Usually there's more work to be done in 1 to 5 than it is from 5 to 9. So most of the work is like the early stage. So I wouldn't be worried about it. It's usually enough detail on the lower levels on the back of the pages to keep people occupied.
Yeah, true. Okay. And what I really see is the opportunity of the finding somehow the understanding of stakeholders for further development of wherever we end, right? Because then you can really show, okay, this would be the roadmap to go on with something like this. And that, of course, that commitment of stakeholders after funding ends with the project and you're left with the tech prototype, then is rather hard. But so I really see opportunities there for us as well in the team. Okay.
But I'd say that, and I say to everyone is that, so, okay, of course, we're super users because we built it inside and out, right? So, but if nothing else, just use it as a coffee table discussion tool to open up the discussion with people. And it's a wonderful way for people to see new perspectives of what their research could be for and what they're doing with it. And, don't force it on somebody, just use it as a discussion tool to talk about very sort of abstract things in a more sort of, concrete way, as I said 100 times, but in the simplest form, it's just a conversation tool, which helps us have better conversations.
Yep, cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Julius asked the question here on, do you have a database or digital version of the tool, or do you manually do it every time for every team? Well, we have intentionally not built a self-driving digital thing, because we use it very much in our coaching, in our sort of coaching process. However, we do have a CRM tool, a database tool, where we track everything. I mean, we're very, very big on data and data points. So every single data point that I've mentioned is tracked and registered and documented, and so we track everything. And I can follow my cases from, if I meet an alumni, I can very quickly say, oh yeah, we met in March 26, 2013, and that's when you talked about your master's thesis. I remember that very well. So I mean, we have everything documented and tracked. There are other users out there that have built digital frameworks for the tool. One of them, example, is the Excel sheet that DTU is going to show us in a month's time. Others have built more sort of elaborate bespoke solutions, but we're still very sort of manual about it, even though we have digital support using it. One thing I'm working on next year, my 2024 project, is to create a slightly more digital version, so I can give more of the responsibility of working and updating to the team, so they can do more work themselves. So that's going to happen in 2024 from our side, at least.